Hello everyone and welcome. This is Alex, the architect for Back4App, and in today's video I'm going to show you a whole system of login and sign up working with GraphQL. Today's video is going to be a little longer than the other ones, so please stay tuned and I hope you like this introductory video. So I'm here on my Back4App account. I also have my Visual Studio Code and my terminal with our command line tool B4A installed. And we are going to use a few tools, so I'm going to use npm, which you can install from this website, npmjs.com. There are instructions here on how to install it. And we're going to use these modules, GraphQL request and browserify. What browserify does, it takes Node.js code and makes it compatible with front-end JavaScript engines such as this one from Google Chrome. So, and I'm also going to use this template for login that I downloaded from codepen.io. The link will be on the description, so you can retrieve that from there. If you come here to export, and then you can download a zip file containing all the necessary files for this. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Back4App website and build a new app. I'm going to call this one Login GraphQL. Hit create. And in order to use GraphQL, we need to use the latest version of parse, at least 3.5.0, which you can retrieve from API console and GraphQL. It will say it here. So I'm going to go to server settings and manage parse server. And from here I'm going to use version 3.6, which is the earliest one to use GraphQL on Back4App. Once I change my version, I also have to reload my website so the component for the GraphQL console will work. And now if I go to core and API console and GraphQL console, you see I have my GraphQL API console working from here with all my schemas and all my docs in here. We're going to use a few mutations for our system today. So we have here users mutation, we have the sign up and the login mutations that we will be using. So I'm going to open my terminal here and go to my desktop and create a new project to retrieve the code for the login GraphQL. So B4A new, and it's an existing project, so I have my login GraphQL here is number 3, and if I just hit enter and enter again, it will create a folder called login GraphQL with a cloud and public folders. We're going to store our code inside the cloud folder, and it's also inside the public folder for the web files. So back here to my Back4App account, I'm going to go to server settings and scroll all the way down to web hosting and live query, and I'm going to activate web hosting so we can publish web files to be hosted by Back4App. So save this. There you go. Now I already downloaded the template from CodePen here. It should be here on my downloads. There you go. And here in this dist folder we have an index.html and style CSS files that we are going to copy, and then we can go to my public folder, open it and paste it in here. I'm going to replace the index.html that I have there. Now, if I do a before-a deploy, it will upload those files back to Back4App. It will also version this, so if I go back to server settings and web hosting, and from here I get my subdomain name and put this domain name .back4app.io. Usually it takes a little while. And there you go. Now I have my login here. A little issue that I noticed with this template, if we go to our Visual Studio and open this file, so for the desktop and login GraphQL, public index.html, you see the developer probably due to copy and pasting, he used the same IDs for a few controls, so we have to change that because we're going to retrieve those controls values from our JavaScript, and they must be different in order to be retrieved. So I'm going to leave this as user and this as pass, but in here I'm going to call it user sign up and pass sign up, and then pass verify sign up, and on the email I'm going to put email sign up, and this should be good to go. Just please remember to change in those IDs, or the JavaScript code that we will create will not be able to retrieve the correct values. We'll do that as we keep coding, right? So I'm also going to use the two npm modules that I told you. So the first one, after you have the npm command installed, you have to install the GraphQL request npm. You can put this anywhere you want, because we will produce a few Node.js files that we will then use Browserify to convert to front-end compatible code. So I'm going to come here and go one directory up where I have my cloud and public folders. I'm going to create one new called, let's call modules. And inside modules I'm going to install the GraphQL request, which you can get the command from here. So just copy this npm I, having some trouble copying and pasting. There you go. This usually takes a little while, but it should be something like this if it worked correctly. And also I'm going to use Browserify, but this one I'm going to install as a global command because I use it all the time, and I probably want it to work from different directories as well. So npm I -g for global and Browserify. And again, you should see something like this if it worked correctly. And we'll have first to start coding our modules that will Browserify in order to be compatible with our front-end JavaScript. So I'm going to create a file here inside the modules folder. Let's go to Visual Studio, create a new file, and save this inside our modules folder. I'm going to call this GraphQL source.js. And since we have our GraphQL request already installed, we can start instantiating that by typing const GraphQL client equals require GraphQL dash request. Now that we have our instantiated GraphQL request, we have to create two main methods that we will be using to authenticate. First one is the signup, and the second one is the login method. But when I browserify code like this, it keeps it private, so I must declare it as a global public method, so I can use it from other files. So the way we do that, we type global dot and then give it a good name. So this one is going to be called signup equals, and then you can start typing our function. So function. And for this function, I'm going to retrieve three values that I'll get from my template here. So if I go to signup, I'll get the username, the password that must match these two fields, and the email address as well. So I'm going to use username, password, and email. So we can use, in this case, form username, form password, and form email. And inside here we can start having our signup code, but I'm going also to copy this and paste it for a login method that will use only the username and password. I will not be using email for this. Let's save this and let's start typing our code. First thing I have to do is have my endpoint. We can retrieve that from the parse website. If I go to GraphQL console, you have your endpoint right here. So I'm going to copy this. Back to Visual Studio. Let's have a constant endpoint equals that endpoint, and now we can have our GraphQL client configured. You can get the configuration for the GraphQL request from here. You have a usage examples. I just used this one here. Where is it? There is one with authentication. Oh, this is the one. But in this case I'm using authorization, but for parse specifically, if you come here, you have the headers that you should use. Don't use your master key. This is using master key because you're going to be into the parse system, so it's protected. So you should protect your master key at all costs, and I'm going to use the JavaScript key for this instead. So if I go back to my code here, and then I can start typing const GraphQL client equals new GraphQL client. I'm going to pass my endpoint, and then I'm going to pass the parameters for them. In this case, headers, and for the headers I'm going to have two distinct values as a JSON file. So there we go. The first one we're going to retrieve is the xparse application ID, and actually let me use double quotes for this. depending on the system, it could be potentially troublesome to use single quotes. This should do. And here I have the xparse master key, but I'm going to use the xparse JavaScript key instead. And we can retrieve those values from server settings and core settings. I come here, I have my app ID right there, and you can have your JavaScript here, and this should be good to go. Now I'm able to start making requests for sign up, so I have to create my mutation. So let's create our mutation here on the GraphQL console, because here we have the autocomplete that can help us a lot by doing a lot of work for us. So as you remember, here in docs I have the users mutation and I have the sign up mutation. You have all the documentation for that, and we're going to code it like this. Mutation, give it a good name, so sign up. This will use the users mutation, and inside here we are going to use the sign up mutations for the users, and this receives some fields, and those fields are username and password, and last but not least, email. But we need to pass some values here for the mutation, and the way we pass variables to a mutation or a query is we put a money sign, and then we tell the variable name, so username, and then semicolons, and then we put the type of the variable, so string, and then we will have the password as a string, and also email as a string. There you go. Now we can use these values here to fill up our requests. And after all this, I must retrieve something, so we're going to retrieve the object ID for the created user. So all I have to do now is copy this mutation. Let's go back to our code. Oops. And type const sign up mutation equals. In JavaScript, this is how you put a string multi-line. So let's just paste that here. Let's put it like this so it is more readable. Maybe a tab here will help. That seems good enough. And now we have to pass the variables that we will retrieve from the method and pass to this mutation. We do this by typing const variables equals, and then we put a JSON formatted object called username, and username is going to be the form username. Then we will have the password, that will be the form password, and last but not least, we will have the email, that will be the form email. The GraphQL request will use this mutation with these variables and fill everything up for us. So now it's time for us to make our request. So we can store that in a data object. So let's type const data equals GraphQL client, which is the one we just created in here, and dot request. And here inside the request we can make all our code. So we're going to use our signup mutation, and then we will have our variables. If all this goes well, we can put a then, and we can pass the data as an arrow function. If everything went well, we will put a alert and say, hooray, user created. Or if something failed, we can have a catch and pass the error object to an arrow function and make an alert saying error plus the error.message. You can save this, and this is pretty much done. So this should be working. We will test it in a few minutes. But we can now copy and paste most of this code and reuse it here for the login method, just changing a few things. So we're going to pass the form username and form password. Oh, it's already there. So we can instantiate our GraphQL client again, and we can use a similar mutation. It will be a little bit different for this one. So we're going to call this one login mutation, and we also have our variables right there, but in this case we won't use the email, and we can have our request as well, logged in. In this case we're going to use the login mutation in there, and this seems quite right. So let's create our login mutation on our GraphQL console. So we're going to do this by typing mutation, giving it a good name, so login, and it will be a user's mutation, and we have the login that use the username and password, but it asked me to use the variable's name, so we will use money sign and username, which is a string, and also money sign password, which is also a string. So I can have my username like this. Come on, paste it. And my password like that. Oops. And once that is correctly done, I can retrieve the session token for my user. So now I have to do is copy all this and paste it in there, format it so it looks a little better, and we are good to go. Now we must change this code to be front-end compatible, and for that we are going to use our Browserify. So here inside the modules we have our GraphQL source JS file, and the way we transform that is we type Browserify and GraphQL source.js and -o as output and GraphQL.js. If it worked, you won't see any error messages, and if you list the files, you'll see I now have my GraphQL.js file in there, which is compatible with my JavaScript front-end engines. So I'm going to copy that. So we can come to modules and get the GraphQL.js, copy, go back to my public folder and put it inside here. And now I'm ready to use my JavaScript methods in order to call this GraphQL JS file that we just created. So back here on the HTML file, we can now start making some changes and having our files included. But first I'm going to create a new JS file and call it main.js. It will be saved inside the login GraphQL and inside the public folder, so main.js. And inside here we can create two different functions to be called from our index.html and then call our GraphQL generated code. So we're going to type function parse signup and also a function parse login. Inside here we will have to retrieve the values for those forms we have on our login page. It's not this one, it's this one. So we do that by creating a few variables and reading the value from the forms. In this case I'm going to read 4 forms: the username, password, repeat, and password and address. And for this one I'm only going to read 2, the username and password. So we do that by typing var username equals document dot get element by ID, and then we can pass the ID of the element we are using. So in this case it should be user sign up dot value. Oops, not node value, just value. There you go. And var password equals all this, and we have to get our password from here. Dot value, and then get var verify password equals all this, and password verify dot value, and var email equals all this, and email sign up dot value. Now I'm retrieving all these values. Before going on, I have to check if the password and verify password matches. We do that by typing if password is not equal to verify password. So if they don't match, we'll make an alert. don't match. And then we will return without executing any code. But if it passes this step, we can use our signup method that we got from our GraphQL here. This is the name we're going to use. And pass our variables. So username, password, oops, and email. The same will work for our parse login. So I'm going just to copy this and change this IDs there. The IDs in this case are user and pass. I don't have to check if the password matches because we don't have any match for the password. And then we have our login method. And we are going to pass these values along. So username and password. Save everything. So I have here my main.js file and my GraphQL source file. I also opened my GraphQL.js, which looks very different because this one was browserified, so it's now compatible with front-end JavaScript engines. I also renamed this because I just noticed it when I used the terminal to create a file. I missed a Q, it was just GraphQL, and now it spells correct. So let's integrate that into our HTML file. So we make two script tags with the source being GraphQL.js. Oops. And also another script with the source being main.js. And this should be good to go. And in here on the buttons I created a on-click event with the parse login for the login button and another one on-click for parse signup for the signup methods that we got from the main.js file. So login and signup. Everything seems good to go, so we are going to deploy this. I'm going to come here and type B4A deploy. This will upload all this code to Back4App. And now if you go back to our Google Chrome and in here and reload our cloud code, I should have my GraphQL JS in there, also my main.js, and the index.js should reflect the script tags and also the on-click events. So everything seems good to go. Remember, this takes a little while to reload, so a error would be acceptable. I'm going to open my console here so we can see if the GraphQL JS has loaded here in sources and the main.js was loaded as well, so we can start testing our signup. So let's start by testing our logic for comparing the passwords and see if they are retrieved correctly. So I'm going to use Alex and I'm going to use here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and here 5, 6, 7, 8. And my email address, so alex@back4app.com, and sign up. So passwords don't match, that logic seems to be correct. Let me choose a new password, so abc123 and again abc123 and sign up. And hooray, user created. So if we come back to core and database browser and user, I should now have my user Alex with my email and the password hidden. Also I should have a session for this user, and there you go. So we can now try to log in with that user. So we go to sign in and type Alex, which is my username, I got it from there, right? And let's try a wrong password, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And invalid username or password. Now let's try my real password, abc123, and the user is now logged in. So this is how we create a sign up and login method using GraphQL and parse along with some browserified Node.js code to integrate everything. I hope you like these videos. I hope to see you on the next ones. If you like this, please leave a thumbs up and see you soon. Bye bye.